Hello there. If you're joining this short webinar, you are diving in along with us to figure out how to make the most of this unprecedented moment in K-12 education. Let's spend just a moment defining our shared challenge. First of all, we have huge student needs. Students coming back this fall with over a year of disrupted learning and having hit our students with the greatest needs the hardest. Secondly, we've got an inflow of federal funding and in some cases state funding that gives us huge possibilities for addressing recovery needs. Third, we know that it's incredibly challenging to use resources in ways that are sustainable and lasting and effective. So the question we want to address today is how can we use student stimulus funds to center equity, accelerate learning, and create a sustainable foundation for long-term improvement. Let's spend a moment to understand the magnitude of the dollars flowing in. It's significantly more support than during the Great Recession, about twice as much at $189 billion. The beauty of this, though, is that it is spread over 3 years, which gives us the opportunity to maybe think more strategically and sustainably about the practices that we're spending on. This translates into about $3,750 per pupil, which constitutes a pretty big piece of an annual budget for a high poverty district. In the first round, it was about 2 to 5%. By the time we got to the third round, that was about 20 to 35% of the operating expenses for a high poverty district. This means that if you were to spread the funds evenly over 3 years, which is not necessarily the best strategy, but just to get a sense of the magnitude of this, this represents about 10 to 15% of the pre-COVID budgets each year, which creates an enormous and unprecedented opportunity. Because dollars are allocated based on the number of students living in poverty, it stands to reason then that states that are high poverty and districts that are high poverty are getting significantly more resources as a percentage of their pre-COVID budgets. This chart shows just that. We looked at budgets across 3 states and those in high needs districts in each of those states to look at the percent of budget reflected. In state A, the average district was receiving about 4% of its pre-COVID operating budget, whereas in state B and state C, lower spending, higher poverty states, this totaled about 11%. But in the cases of the districts with high needs, the percent of budget is even higher. In state A, the high needs district was getting about 3 times as much as the average district, and in state B, twice as much, at a total of 25% of the budget. So clearly this is representing a huge opportunity for the highest need districts, just the place where we need to focus most on recovery and redesign. So we've got unprecedented dollars flowing into some of these school districts, but we also have a moment unlike any other in our lifetimes. This single year has brought dramatic changes in mindset about what's possible in K-12 education. Over this single year, there's an understanding that changes in school designs to better meet student needs and teachers' needs are possible. That technology can be a central part of instruction, collaboration, and teachers' professional learning. We've seen a shift in how families can and must be deeply involved in supporting student learning. We've seen teachers' roles being differentiated in ways that have the potential to benefit everyone. We've seen community partners and programs jumping in to help facilitate learning, both inside and outside of typical school hours. And we've seen a change in mindset that it's everyone's job to tackle racial inequities by addressing system structures, policies, practices, and biases. Luckily, to address this moment, we don't have to start from scratch. We've identified 5 power strategies that are helping the districts we work with organize their vision and strategy. They are grounded in years of research about how to accelerate and sustain high levels of learning for all students. They address students' academic and social emotional needs that have been emerged or been exacerbated as a result of the pandemic. They tackle underlying cost structures in ways that make them sustainable to implement over time. And they help leaders realize a vision for students and teachers that fulfills our hopes and expectations for what schools can be. I'm going to spend just a minute walking through the 5 power strategies that we're using with school systems. If you want to read more about the research underlying them, you can go to our website and download Start Now to get more details and examples of real-life schools that are doing this work. The first is empowering adaptable instruction. The curriculum and instruction, of course, is at the heart of everything we're doing. And so investments to ensure that teaching teams have high-quality curriculum, the time and support to together assess student learning, and figure out how to provide just-in-time support is a critical investment need. And if a school system is starting from a place where their curriculum just isn't up to the moment, this is a wonderful time to be investing to do that over the next 3 years. If a district is in a place where they've been doing this work, it's a time to double down on it. The second category is time and attention. This is probably the one most districts are including first in their plans. This is about expanding and targeting individual attention and learning time, both inside and outside traditional school hours, to help students with their unfinished learning. The third is about improving the teaching job. This is one that sometimes isn't part of the plans. This is about restructuring teaching jobs and roles to make sure that they're more rewarding, collaborative, and sustainable while enabling excellent instruction from a diverse teaching force. This sustainable point is really key here because we've heard and read so much, and many of you are experiencing the exhaustion that we're all feeling right now as we're coming out of a year of this really demanding moment and going forward into a new one where everything is still changing and the challenge is as great or greater than it ever was. And so figuring out ways of making this job doable, where teachers can thrive, is a critical part of ensuring that we have great instruction over the next 3 years, and absolutely should be a focus of investment. The fourth category is about organizing to cultivate positive student-adult relationships and ensure support for wellness and social emotional needs. Helping students reconnect and re-engage is not something that happens without allocation of resources and without conscious thinking about how to organize time and systems and processes and routines to enable those things to happen. And finally, engaging community partners, families, and other out-of-school resources to increase academic, health, and social emotional support is something we've done over this period of time, need to do more of, and need to set up systems and resources to enable these things to happen over the long term. Now, as I've said, we have a short period of time to figure out how to reopen schools this fall and what to do this summer. And so the strategies that we create need to be doable and realistic about the kinds of things we can do in the short term. But we do have a moment to build toward more sustainable kinds of changes in the way we organize schools and systems to help all students achieve high standards. So we're introducing this idea called Do Now, Build Toward, and I'm going to spend a minute on a chart that we think helps explain this idea. So this chart helps you understand from an economic point of view how we're thinking about this do now, build toward idea. So first, we're starting with ESSER funds increasing over the green by about 10 to 20%, depending on what district you're in and if it's spread over years. And those dollars should be invested in extra spending to help address near-term recovery needs, as well as do now investments that both support recovery and lay the groundwork for redesign. Now, hopefully some of those dollars, those in the dark blue, can go away over time because the needs won't be as extreme going forward. For example, after an initial bulge, hopefully we won't have so many students needing credit recovery kinds of support. But the rest of those needs will continue for years beyond this moment and existed before we began. And we need to think about what are the investments that redesign what we're doing. So that redesign enables us to also shed spending that wasn't working for us before or that is no longer part of our long-term vision while investing to create and pilot new ways of working. So that's a spending picture of do now, build toward. Let's look at it from a point of view of strategy. If I take a look at power strategy number 2, time and attention, this is just an example. What would do now mean? So it might mean for your district extending core instructional time. Many districts are adding summer school, adding time before the beginning of the school year, adding intersession time over vacation, or even adding time to the school day. It might mean assigning non-teaching staff to small group instruction at targeted times in the day. And it might mean identifying partners to provide high dosage tutoring for a subset of high need students. Those are things that could be feasible for next year, starting in the fall. But if we do those in these do now quick ways without doing it in the context of a longer term vision, we're missing a moment. Because what we're trying to build toward, if we depend on research and we look at what the highest performing schools do, is that we want more learning time through extended school days and longer years, intersessions, intensive high dosage tutoring, and other after school learning opportunities. We do want smaller class sizes or really group sizes in priority grade levels and subjects where student needs are greatest. And we don't need to have as small class sizes in other areas. We want integrated learning experiences across live and asynchronous platforms and specialized and advanced high school classes that are rich offerings, some offered online to maximize and free teachers for more individualized instruction. In terms of the teaching job, the do nows could look like sustaining and expanding the flexibility in which educators are engaged in instruction throughout the day. We have school systems we're working with who are revising their master schedules and calendars for next year to enable significantly more time for teachers to learn together, collaborate, reflect on student progress, and connect with students and families on a one-on-one basis. We have systems that are investing right now to reduce teaching loads in targeted grades and subjects, and to strengthen curriculum and assessments as a foundation for improving core instruction and as a way of supporting teachers in doing this challenging work. But these are the beginning, not the ultimate vision. What we're building toward are teachers' workday, work year, and student loads that allow time ongoing for the kinds of collaboration we're talking about in these sorts of individual connections. We want incoming teachers to benefit ongoing and always from shelter and develop models that lighten their workload and support their development. We want to create opportunities, career paths, and compensation systems that enable highly effective teachers to take on meaningful leadership roles that extend their impact and allow them to continue working with students. We want to make sure that teacher compensation is highly competitive with other professional roles and grows based on their contribution and impact. And we want to make sure that teachers have state-of-the-art technology and tools that make their work easier, not harder. This do now, build toward approach is difficult to implement. There's all kinds of pressure to address immediate needs, which will limit efforts to change underlying cost structures. Rapid timelines, an understandable focus on the immediate and urgent, a historic premium on spending new dollars on staff positions in schools. All of these point to a real need to step back and figure out how to support a really new way of doing this work so that we avoid using stimulus to pad budget shortfalls and reinvest in the status quo. So even if we know what to do, we have a fabulous do now, build toward plan, it's really hard to figure out how to invest new resources strategically. So we've taken a look at 3 district budgets of districts that we're working with and know deeply what these spending items are, and we've coded them by power strategy. And you can see that the spending is quite different across these districts. And some of that is the result of really different places that these districts are starting from and a really different combination of needs. So key point here, every district plan should not be the same. That wouldn't be strategic. It needs to start with the bright spots that folks are experiencing, the differences in concentration of needs that folks have, and the place that they are in terms of implementing their strategies before COVID that we're building towards new ways of working in schools. And the other piece, though, is that not all of the spending in these plans is strategic or would fit the do now, build toward mode. And thinking about which of these things in the gray should be part of the recovery and redesign investment and which shouldn't. Not making a judgment here, but certainly, dollars spent on technology and maintaining district digital access needs to be part of many plans. Facilities upgrades may be able to be paid through other sources of funding, but certainly could be an equity investment that helps avoid cliffs going forward. Be wary of things that are across the board staffing increases, across the board compensation increases. Those things are often unstrategic and hard to sustain going forward and make a case for sustaining going forward. What we're saying is investments should be connected to a theory of action or a strategy for how they will address student needs or accomplish one of these power strategies. As we think about do now, build toward, a piece of the build toward needs to be shifting resources to create and sustain these visions. And there are 7 key areas where resources need to shift, and districts need help planning toward how those resources will shift because they don't happen by themselves. So the first is ensuring equitable funding across schools, with more going to schools serving higher concentrations of students with greater learning needs. We have a big temporary blip on this front where dollars are going towards districts that have the highest concentrations of needs. And most of the districts that we're working with are thinking about strategies of making sure that the schools and students that have the greatest need inside their districts are also getting more dollars. But this doesn't mean that those sorts of funding patterns stay after the dollars go away. And so there's work to be done to figure out how to sustain the higher levels of spending where it's working in schools with the higher needs. The second big category is revamping teacher and school leader compensation paths. We cannot sustain differentiated roles for teachers where some teachers make significantly more without having other teachers make less or other educators make less, or changing the curve of compensation, if you understand what I mean, but changing the rate at which compensation moves or stops increasing. The third big area of resource shift is varying class size and learning time by subject, grade, and student need. And those things are embedded in longstanding patterns and contracts that make it hard to vary those or change them up. And we need to be paying attention to those kinds of things. The fourth area is investing to maximize use of inclusion strategies to support students with disabilities. What's amazing about this moment is that we will have extra resources to support students in classrooms with their just-in-time learning needs and leveraging the special expertise that special education teachers have to support all students in these kinds of ways could be an incredible move forward. The fifth big area is to reduce teacher-facilitated time. If we want teachers to have more time for teaming, planning, and connecting individually with students and families, they need to be on the hook less for direct facilitation of instruction. New technology has created real opportunities for freeing time for teachers and still maintaining learning time for students. Finally, there are real opportunities to leverage technology to deliver certain kinds of instruction, which really links to the above strategy of reducing teacher-facilitated time. But it could also enable us to provide some kinds of coursework in remote sorts of settings or through virtual providers while doubling down on providing in-person support in other subjects and categories and grades. And the last big shift is figuring out how to much more systematically incorporate other educators and outside providers in delivery of instruction. As many districts are already beginning to do, this gives us a moment to double down on that, to highlight bright spots all over the country of places that are doing that work. A big area here as we do this work, and it's so difficult because districts are moving so fast, is to figure out how to engage families, educators, and other stakeholders in developing these new designs and in building the case for these longer term investments. So it's an incredibly ambitious agenda that I've laid out here. And districts and school leaders will need all the help that they can get in 7 specific areas. States and policymakers can play a huge role with these things. The first is to remove policy barriers that make it hard to change up how schools are organized in terms of schedules and staffing models, and change policies that circumscribe the opportunities for teachers in earning more compensation and changing up their roles. States can play a huge role in sponsoring pilots of new ways of working and including networks and cohorts of districts and sharing what they're learning along the way. Third, they can create planning and design tools and models so that districts don't have to start from scratch in terms of figuring out how to even get started on this work and how to sustain that work. It's going to be 3 to 5 years of really thinking deeply about how to organize spending and align it to the strategies that will get us to a new normal. States can play a big role in elevating bright spots and translating those lessons for wider use. They can support the expansion of district capacity for planning and community engagement. That long list of ways we need to engage families and communities doesn't just happen without bandwidth at the district level and partnerships at the community level. Districts and schools will need help from support providers who can help them with all pieces of this work, from the planning to the implementation to the setting up of new programs and support. And many of these providers don't have the ability to scale up or the finances to scale up quickly to support these urgent needs. And then finally, districts will need help with processes for monitoring progress and continuously improving. What we think might work now is not what's going to end up working in total. And so being nimble about changing up what we're doing along the way is going to be a critical part of these next 3 years. And monitoring what is working will enable us to build the case for sustainable funding of the things that work. And in many cases, we will need to make the case to spend more money on K-12 education to accomplish the really ambitious goals we have for helping all students get to high levels of learning over the next 3 years and well beyond. So in this brief presentation, I hope I've left you with 4 big takeaways. We've got a moment to address both immediate student needs and to catalyze the kinds of structural changes that so many of us have been working toward over the last decades. We have an approach, a do now, build toward approach that's grounded in research, has the opportunity to change student experiences and be sustainable over time. We cannot do that without resource shifts, and part of the planning and work that we need to do over the next 3 to 5 years is how to shift those resources, stop spending money on certain things and spend more money in other areas, changing up the structures that dictate the way we've used resources over the past 50 years. And then finally, effective community engagement and strategic policy and advocacy efforts will be critical for us to maintain the surrounding conditions, support, and engagement that we need to take advantage of this incredible moment. So please feel free to check out our website for more information, which will be coming throughout as we work with our district partners to create more and more tools and lessons that we can share with you all, and be in touch with us if we can help in any way. Thanks so much.